All right, in today's video, we are going to learn how to create a flat list. Now, when you look at this flat list right here, the data that we see displayed comes from an array of values, and each one of these is considered an item that was rendered. And in our next video, we will learn how to customize the look of each row. But for right now, we're going to focus on just getting the items on the screen. We're going to learn how to do this list item separator, which is that skinny gray line that we see here, and then just also reinforcing how to work with custom components and a custom colors doc in our style folder. So go ahead and get your code environment ready. We want to start by making a new project, and the suggested name is FlatList Examples because the next few videos will have a few different scenarios all related to flat lists. And then after you've made your project and you cd into the folder, you can use that npm run reset command to get your code cleaned up. And inside our app, we want to make two folders, components and styles. Inside components, we want to make two files for each of the components we're going to create. And then in styles, we want to make a file called colors.tsx. All of these have the tsx extension because they are TypeScript files. If you go here and you double click on this, this will bring up editable code where you can just copy and paste this so you don't have to retype it all. You don't have to use these colors, but these are just suggested ones if you want some colors to work with. All right, so pause the video while you get all of that set up, and then we will come back together and start coding. All right, so I've got my folder created. You'll notice that I have my app folder, and inside there I have a components and a styles folder with each of the different TypeScript files you were asked to create. And if we look at our default index file, you'll notice a couple things. Most importantly, I want you to notice that style sheet wasn't included, and we're definitely going to want our style sheet. So let's import that at the top. And then a shortcut snippet that you can use is RNSS, and that will get you the style sheet set up for a basic styles. It's a great shortcut to use, except it will not import the style sheet for you, so you'll want to make sure that you put that there. And then I personally don't care for having all of these inline styles, so I'm actually going to remove these, and I'm going to make a style for my container. And I'm just going to paste those in there. And then for my view, I'm going to say that my view will use styles.container. And let's just clean this up. All right, there we go. So I've got my view with its style, and essentially I use the same styles that I have there. Now, we talked about creating this colors file, and the nice thing about this colors file is it allows us to declare colors once and then use them over and over. So for example, right now my background color is yellow. I don't love yellow, but it's very obvious to see, so that's why I'm gonna leave it for the moment. And if I were to go ahead and say that I wanted to use that, I would need to import it. So I'm gonna import colors, and we can see here that it's importing it from my styles folder. And then I can apply a background color property of colors.background. And now that will apply that color. If I decide that that color is a little too bright and I wanted to go with maybe say a light gray, and I change that in my colors, then that would reflect it here. Okay, so now let's go ahead and let's get some stuff on the screen. Now, if we look back to the idea that we started with, we'll see that we didn't have our list in the middle of the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take out the value that is centering everything here. I don't want it to be centered vertically, and that would be my justify content. So I'm going to take that out, but I also don't want it to be so high against the screen. So I'm going to add in a top margin. We'll see 20 and see how that looks. So now notice what this did was this gave me a margin of my container within its parent. And I really wanted just to move the text down. So that wouldn't be a margin, that would actually be my padding. And so what that does is that gives me space of my first element from its top edge of its parent container. All right, and then I also want to make a text style called header. And in here, we'll do our font size, we'll say 30, and we'll make our font weight bold. And then I will apply this to my text. Now I know a lot of the things that I'm showing here are not related to FlatList, but I sometimes find that the more you see similar concepts reviewed, the easier it is to make them commonplace. And all right, so now we're ready to start working on our FlatList. Okay, so I have my FlatList file, but it is empty. And another really useful snippet is RNFES. And what this one does is this is going to get you your basic default functional components. Now, if you're not seeing those snippets working the way that mine are, it's possible that you don't have the same extensions installed. And the extension that is making that work, I believe, is this one right here. This one that has a lot of downloads. If you look at that, 13.8 million downloads. So if you don't have this extension installed, I definitely encourage you to do so. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and do the same thing for our list item separator. We'll do RNFES, save that, and we'll come back to that one later. Okay, so now that I have this set up, right now this component is ready to be imported. So in my index, after my header, I'm going to add a FlatList Basic. Now you'll see several different options here. I want to make sure I choose the one that is in my components folder, and then I'm going to use my self-closing syntax. And now when I save it, I will see whatever I happen to have on this screen. So for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just focus on editing FlatList Basic, because every time I make changes to here and save it, I will see those changes reflected over here. Okay, so in order to work within this file, we need to have our data, and we need to have our data type and an array of data. So there are lots of different ways that you can set up your data, work with your data. For this video series, the purpose is learning how to display the things on the screen. So I'm just going to have all of the data inside of this component. So for starters, we need to make a data type. So we're going to say type data type equals, and then we're going to define what this looks like. We're going to have an ID, and the ID is our unique identifier. This is necessary because without a unique identifier, the FlatList won't be able to know which element you have currently clicked on. So in some cases, your IDs might be things like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In other cases, they might be really long strings of letters and numbers that you get from an online database. But for right now, we're just going to use the simple numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for simplicity. And then we're going to have a title, which will be the text that I will display on the screen. And this will also be of type string. All right, so if we look at this example that we're trying to build, the titles are first item, second item, third item, and so on. That's where we're going to see that code show up. Okay, so now that we've created our data type, now we are going to make an array of this data type. So we're going to say const data, and then I'm going to say this is of type data type, and it will be an array. And then now I'm going to create my array. And my array is going to be consisting of multiple instances of this data type. So I'm going to use curly braces, and I will say that the ID is 1, and the title is first item. And again, you can write whatever you want here. If you want to put people in your family, whatever you want. Each of these is going to be separated by commas. So again, for the sake of convenience, I'm going to copy and paste this a few times. We need to make sure that these IDs are unique. If they are not, you will get an error. And I'm just going to update this. And feel free to make more of these. For the purposes of this video, I'm just going to stop here with those 4 items. All right, so now what we're going to do is we have to build our FlatList. So before we build our FlatList, let's just take a look at the code. So within our documentation for FlatList, there are 2 required props. The first is data, and that's the name of the array that will be used to populate our FlatList. So for us, that is our array called data in all caps. Then we have render item, and render item is essentially saying how every element in this array should be rendered on screen for its row in the flat list. So we can either put that code in line, which is what we'll start with, or you can create a custom component to show how each item should be rendered. So in practice, I would use the custom component because it gives me more control. So we'll start by just having it on the screen, and then we will learn how to take that code and shift it into a custom component. Now, some other props that we can use, key extractor. This is going to tell the flat list to use the ID as the React key instead of a default key property. Extra data. So what extra data does is this gives you another variable that your flat list can depend upon. And because remember, components will only re-render if the data that they depend upon changes. So if I were to have my array of data, which I'm going to have, and that array isn't changing, then my flat list would never change. However, if I wanted, say for example, each element to change colors as it's clicked on, so like right now, first item is selected. If I were to click on fourth, maybe I wanted the fourth one to turn this darker purple color. If I wanted that to happen, then what I could do is I could create another variable that keeps track of which item is selected, and then I could tell extra data that that variable is something to save and keep track of, and so it will re-render if that variable changes. So we'll take a look at how that works also. And then we'll come back to learning about the item separator component when we get there. All right, so let's go ahead and let's get our code set up for this. As I listed here, we're going to first make our array, which we did. Then we're going to make our flat list, which we're about to do, and then we'll start learning about our item separator component. All right, so inside here, we are going to go down to our flat list, and inside our flat list, so as we start typing, we want to make sure we import it. Now you've got to be really careful with the syntax here. I find that if I close my flat list first, and then add a little bit of space, I can start putting in my my props. So I'm going to have data equals, and because my array name is in JavaScript, I have to put it in curly braces, and then key extractor. The key extractor is going to be, we're going to call it item. It's of type data type, and this input, what I want to extract is the ID. So basically what this is saying is for every item in my array data, an item is of the data type, which I declared up top, I want to extract its ID, and that's what I will use as the unique key for that element in my list. And then now I'm going to say render item. And render item, again, this is where the syntax can get a little wonky. So all of the code needs to be inside curly braces, and then I'm going to have parentheses for my parameter that I'm putting in. And then now in curly braces, I am going to say item. And so basically what this is telling me is that for each item in my list called data, I want to do the following. So look at the syntax here. So right now I've got my opening curly brace for render item. I have a parenthesis curly brace for the parameter that's going into this render item, and then I'm going to return or render the following. So I'm going to open parentheses. Let's hit enter again. Okay, so inside here, I'm going to make a touchable opacity. And for this touchable opacity, I'm going to have it on press, and my on press is just simply going to do a console.log, and it is going to log item.title. All right, so that's what my touchable opacity is going to do. And then inside my touchable opacity, I'm going to have a view. And then inside my view, I'm going to have text. And you're going to notice that when we save this, there's not really going to be any styling. It's not going to look pretty. It's just going to be functional. All right, so let's go ahead and let's save this. And if we take a look at our device, we will see that we have each of these items on here. But we're going to notice that they don't really have any neat look to them. And so that's going to be our next part, to go ahead and start styling them and making them look how we want. So right now, all they do is show up on the screen, and that's about it. If we look at our log, so down in our terminal, as I click on them, I can see that the item I'm clicking on is being logged, but really that's not giving me a whole lot of functionality. All right, so stay tuned for the next video for us to learn how to style these, add that item separator, and then in our final video in this series, we'll start looking at how to make a custom component.